I'm Tom, and I'm 56 years old. My soon-to-be ex-wife is Susan, who is 50. On a lovely Sunday morning, Susan dropped a bomb that changed everything for us. As we sat down to talk, Susan expressed that with the kids gone, she felt there was nothing left in her life. In response, I, being the person I am, suggested we have sex, thinking it might lighten the mood. However, she cringed and waved her hands, revealing her true intentions. She wanted to go out and explore life, which left me in shock. I tried to reassure her that finding a proper job at her age might be challenging, but she countered by suggesting I become an old-age model, even offering to make some calls for me. In a playful manner, I declined and jokingly mentioned wanting to date other people. Susan's serious response caught me off guard. In a nutshell, she confessed to wanting to see other people, arguing that it wouldn't be cheating if I was informed in advance. I disagreed, emphasizing that it would still break our vows and be considered a sin. Susan was adamant, telling me not to lecture her and insisting that she was serious. Feeling the weight of the situation, I went silent, realizing that the person I had only thought about being intimate with was Susan. Despite having other opportunities, I had always chosen my wife over everyone else. It was Susan's turn to stay quiet, but it didn't last long. She told me that she had plans for a date that night, and nothing would stop her. I tried to remind her of our 12 years of marriage, expressing the pain in my voice. Frustrated, I left the room. True to her word, she went out that night, and I coped by drinking a whole bottle of Jack Daniel and getting wasted. The next morning, Susan was all smiles, but I was a wreck. She told me she had met someone named Clive. Overwhelmed, I rushed to the bathroom to vomit. Susan came running, asking if I was okay. In response, I sarcastically told her I was just getting rid of the love I had left for her. After washing my face, I wanted to lay down on my bed. I pleaded with Susan to reconsider her choices and not choose a path that would lead to pain. She responded coldly, saying Clive was better than me in bed, had a great job, a great body, and she wouldn't let go of him. She threatened me with divorce, warning that I would end up on the streets if I left her. I closed my eyes, feeling defeated. That evening, Susan dressed up and left for her date, leaving me alone and broken. I limped back to my room, opened my safe, and took out my SIG pistol. I pointed the pistol at my head and closed my eyes. After struggling for 5 minutes, I was soaked in sweat and breathing heavily. When I looked up, I saw a defeated man in the mirror beside my bed. I asked myself if it was really me, Tom. Holding the pistol to the mirror, I whispered bang, and then went to bed. The next morning was different. My wife hadn't come home yet. I cooked a good breakfast, had my coffee, and decided to enroll myself in the nearest gym. After a 2-hour workout, I returned to find my wife at home, asleep in our bed. I chose not to wake her, went to the bathroom, and took a bath. Then, I grabbed my fishing gear, a 6-pack of beer, and headed to the river to fish. As I fished, my mind was working on a plan to get back at my wife. I considered extreme measures like drowning her in the river or blowing up her car, but rejected those ideas, realizing they could land me in prison for a lifetime. Divorce seemed expensive, and I didn't want to give her any money. Instead, I decided to wait, observe, and plan my actions. I concluded that I would move out of the house, but I didn't want her to stay there either. After a few days, I continued sleeping in the same bed as my wife, but refused to be intimate with her. Around Christmas, she told me she'd be spending the holiday with Clive and would be away for the weekend. She suggested I go out for the entire week. When she asked how I would spend Christmas, I replied that maybe I'd find someone just like she had. She was happy and hugged me, but I felt disgusted and pretended to be happy. She left in the morning, and that's when I put my plan into action. Since she wasn't interested in our house, she didn't know it was now on the market for rent. On the same day she left, I closed the deal with new tenants. As I held the deed to the house, I didn't need my wife's signature. I rented a condo in the city with a fantastic view. A week later, when my wife returned, she got a huge shock. Her house was gone, and she found herself on the street. I had given the new tenants my address, and soon enough, she was at my door, screaming about why I rented our house. I told her the house didn't matter and showed her the condo, saying she could stay for one night before going back to Clive. Confused, she asked what I meant. I explained that she and Clive should spend more time together. I also mentioned that the rent from our house paid for the condo. She stayed the night and left in the morning. Now it was time to deal with Clive. I made some calls, found out about his job and family, ensuring not to harm his family. I just wanted to mess up his life. After a few calls, I made sure he would lose his job in the next 3 months. I then installed a dating app and began my new life. Now, my wife would only be with me for 1 day a week, and the rest of the time, I could enjoy my life. No divorce, no alimony, and I could still use her for sex. 3 months later, she returned to the condo looking visibly upset. I smiled and told her to talk away because I was always there for her. "It's not good enough, Tom," she said, frowning at me. "It's not working out as I expected." "I'm not happy." "But you've got what you wanted, haven't you, Susan?" I pointed out to her. "You were the one who made it clear that you wouldn't give up your lover and that you intended to keep seeing him. Take it or leave it. That's what you told me." "I know," she mumbled, looking very unhappy. "But I just didn't expect you to agree so easily. I thought, oh damn it. I didn't know what I thought." "You were quite clear at the time, Susan," I reminded her. "I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. You told me you've been seeing that guy Clive since last Christmas, and you wanted to spend weekends with him." I agreed, and you said it would be just weekends. "Not better, just different," Susan grunted, unable to meet my glare. "I really meant that we carry on more or less as usual, but I'd spend my weekends, or at least some of them, at Clive's place. You know, spending time with him." "Fucking him," I interjected. "Well, yes," she admitted, wringing her hands together, "but that would be all. The rest of the time, I'd be living with you like normal." And so I agreed, and I grinned at her. "Take it or leave it, like you said. So now what's the problem?" "It was just supposed to be weekends, Tom. So, I was generous, sweetheart. I enjoyed telling her that you wanted weekends, and I gave you most of the week as well." "You didn't complain at the time," Susan claimed, quite rightly, as it happened. "I went on that 2-week holiday with Clive. When I came back, you'd rented our house out and moved into this fancy apartment," she continued. I smiled graciously, admiring the view from the picture windows of the city vista and the river winding its way into the distance. I had explained to Susan that all the rent from our house barely covered the rent on my new place. "But I only get to stay here 1 night a week, Tom," Susan sobbed. "It's just not as I imagined it." "You don't enjoy the sex, Susan," I demanded, putting on my best disappointed look. "Of course I do, honey," she gushed. "It's better than it ever was. Clive just doesn't seem to cut it anymore since he lost his job and got beaten up that night. It's just not enough." "Oh, he got beaten up? That's awful, sweetheart." I rushed to console her, thinking to myself that it's strange he got hurt while he was supposed to be having an affair with my wife. "If you need another night with me, maybe I could ask Jane to give Wednesdays a miss from time to time," I suggested. "That's not what I want, Tom," Susan snapped. "Well, how about Fridays then? Mary could swap with Nikki, or maybe double up with her," I offered. "I don't just want Fridays." "For God's sake, Tom," my wife cried between sobs. "I want you back." "Karen's going back to college next week, Susan," I continued, trying to find a solution to our problem. "Would Saturday afternoons be any better?" "For God's sake, Tom, you're my husband. I love you, and want you back full time. Just give me the chance to prove it to you," Susan pleaded. "You've heard my offer, Susan," I answered solemnly. "Now that we're more like friends with benefits than a married couple, I really enjoy sleeping with you once a week. It's a pleasant change from the younger girls I've been seeing since you left. But you've heard my offer, and that's all I've got to say except for one thing." "What's that, honey?" Susan asked, looking up at me hopefully with a beaming smile. "Take it or leave it," I grinned at her. "Take it or leave it.